What's up, YouTube? It's time to get another strong opinion off my chest. This one's certainly been brewing for a while. I've just been super busy lately with classes ending and everything. I haven't had time to really sit down and talk about it, but now I do. So yeah, I've been listening to a lot of hip-hop lately. I'm a huge hip-hop fan. I don't really discriminate in my taste. I love everything from the early 80s stuff to, the classic period in the 90s to the 21st century stuff I grew up on, to the gangsta scene, everything, all of it. I think there's great stuff in all of it. I think there's crap in every genre too, so you just gotta be careful. And first off, right off the gate, I realize that the title of this video is very provocative. And I'd just like to say that I'm not trying to proclaim that Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous is the best hip-hop album of all time. I'm simply putting the question out there because to me, this album deserves to be mentioned in that list of quintessential definitive hip-hop releases. The Reasonable Doubts, the Illmatics, the All Eyes on Me's, the Ready to Dies, those albums, And it's not, unfortunately, and it fucking pisses me off, and I need to talk about it. So just for anyone, because unfortunately, especially for my generation, who aren't as familiar with the 90s hip-hop, but beyond Tupac and Biggie and Jay-Z, Big L was a Harlem MC. He released 2 studio albums under his name. One was after his death. He was shot in '99. The first one was Lifestyles. That was his studio debut. And the second one was The Big Picture, which came out in, I believe, 2000. So here's the overall basis of my argument. Every quintessential rapper is noted for contributing something to the game. Nas was a storyteller. You listen to Illmatic, and it's some of the most vivid storytelling in all of hip-hop. Tupac was known for his almost objective critique of the street life and of himself. He was very introspective, and that really hit home for a lot of people. Biggie was a very witty, he had a really good sense of humor, his punchlines were sharp. And what's interesting about this album, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous, is you can find all those elements in one album, which is why I think it's so definitive. Which is why, if someone asked me who wasn't a fan of hip-hop to list for, a Desert Island hip-hop album, I would actually point them to this one before the other ones. It might have to do with my personal taste. It might not. But let me just give you guys some examples. Like, there's a song here called Street Struck, which is a real Tupac kind of song. It's like, he's really able to detach and kind of look at the street life, look at some of the superficial stuff that goes on, the glamorized drug dealing, and he's not safe from his own critique. Throws himself in the fire right with people, saying that he was a drug dealer, and if he hadn't found rap, he'd be in the same boat. He just talks about kind of the senseless pursuit of the glamorized gangster lifestyle in the song Street Struck, which is really cool. Then you got like the Biggie type lines where he just says ridiculous shit that just makes you chuckle to yourself because it's clever and it's funny. He's like, for example, there's a song, Let 'Em Have It, L. There's this line on there where he says, "I've knocked out so many teeth, I've made the tooth fairy bankrupt." It's just, that's something, I feel like that's something Biggie would have said. Like, just so clever, it just makes you laugh. It's really, he's a really creative rapper. His punchlines were really along the same lines as Biggie's. And then you got someone like Nas, and there's some really great storytelling on this album too. When you talk about, there's an album called Fed Up With The Bullshit, where there's a song called Fed Up With The Bullshit on this album that deals with corrupt cops and racist cab drivers. And there's no long, extended story on this album, like New York State of Mind by Nas. There's none of that, but he gives some real vivid, clear insights into what it was like in Harlem in the 90s. Even for a white suburban kid, really gives you a pretty clear picture. And he just lets it, he's very to the point. He just fucking like stuff like All Black and Danger Zone. Like, for example, there's a genre of hip hop, subgenre of hip hop that's known as horrorcore, and it's basically the stuff with the very violent, over the top lyrics. The best example of that I can give is like the first half of Eminem's career, some of the ridiculous shit he said on those first 2 proper studio releases. So there are songs on here like Danger Zone and All Black where you have lines where he says one line like, "I even fuck a dead bitch," or like stuff like that was very influential, and this album is sometimes credited with pioneering that kind of stuff. I don't think it did. I think there's a lot of, if you listen to his underground stuff, there's a lot of other rappers who were doing that. So I'm not giving him credit. I'm just saying it was ahead of its time in terms of the horrorcore stuff. There's a lot of multi-syllable rhyme schemes on here. That's very much ahead of its time. He was a real wordsmith. Like and you're known especially. He's known actually for a song on the second album called Ebonics, which is like a dictionary rap kind of thing where he goes through all the ghetto terms and picks them apart. But on this album, there's evidence of that kind of stuff too. You know, his vocabulary is rich, and his ability to rhyme multiple syllables is really impressive. This album is just... What's interesting too is that this isn't like, if you know your Big L history, the label, this is really interesting too into like the insight of what it was like the 90s. The label actually thought the album was too dark, so they haven't made a few singles, which are like the first 3 songs on the album, which are Put It On, MVP, and No Ends, No Skins. But what I love about this album is that the commercial stuff doesn't compromise lyricism. This is a fucking hip-hop album. You know, nowadays we grow up in a world where pop is infused with hip-hop. You got Taylor Swift doing songs with B.O.B., you know. But these tracks, he will hit you with 3 or 4 verses on every song. Like the title track, Lifestyle is the Poor and Dangerous. Literally, just, there's like a 2-minute long verse, and that's the song. Which is great, because it's all about the lyrics, it's all about the poetry, it's all about, you know, actual flow. And that's what makes this a real hip-hop album. You know, what went on in the 90s was real hip-hop. And this album, to me, captures that better than any. What I was saying before, the commercial stuff doesn't even compromise the great lyrics. Like, there's a song, No Ends, No Skins, which is one of my favorites. That was, obviously, for my generation who grew up with Kanye, that was the original gold digger. He even says the term in the song. He basically talks about women's ridiculous priorities when it comes to finding a man, you know? Like, girls that won't even talk to you asking you for a buck, you know, lines like that. Like, and he even says gold digger in it, and it's just such a... He's so brutally honest, which just makes this album so potent. Every word matters, because he's not... The only time he's not being honest is when he's being ridiculous about, like, the horrorcore stuff. It reminds me a lot of, like, the early Eminem stuff, where it's like, you have these songs where he's just telling you exactly what it is, and then he just gets ridiculous sometimes. Like the line about the Tooth Fairy going bankrupt. Like, that's fucking hilarious. It makes you laugh, catches you off guard, so it's not just this guy complaining about street life all the time. But when he does do that, it's really effective. Like I said before, Street Struck is a really special song. It's a message that can be applied to everyone, you know. Don't be caught up in superficial priorities, you know. It's a lot of the stuff he says, it's funny because it's very location specific, it's very culture specific, in that he's talking about New York City. You know, obviously there's a big East Coast, West Coast thing at this time. New York City, specifically Harlem, specifically 139 Atlantics, which is this part of Harlem. I think it's a park. There's a park on 139 Atlantics. I'm not positive. So he's talking about a very specific area in a very specific time, but his messages are universal. And when an artist is able to connect with people on that level, it's really something cool. That's why, and again, like I said before, it's all about the lyrics, it's all about the flow. There's no bullshit on here. There's just verse after verse after verse. Like there's a song in here called 8 is Enough. 8 rappers on one song. You know, he has literally 8 fucking guests on one song. And it's really cool. It's a cool one. Another highlight is, I talked about All Black, which is a really cool one. But even when he boasts, he does it in a style that's lyrically impressive. As Biggie did, you know? Like, sometimes people complain about, like, hip-hop artists who only boast and who only talk about the most macho things possible. But you listen to some of the classic... Even, you listen to Nas, like with the Pen I'm Extreme. He's bragging. It's a big part of hip-hop. It's a very masculine art form. And Big L does it too on this album, and it doesn't mean it doesn't mean he's a superficial rapper. It means he's a fucking rapper. I'll even say this. The album after this, which is called The Big Picture, which was released after his death, might even be better in some respects. I think that's the album that gets the more recognition. Kind of like Biggie with Ready to Die and Life After Death. I think people recognize Life After Death as the quintessential one. Like that album, like there's a song called 98 Freestyle on that second album It's not actually a freestyle, I don't think. I think it's all written. But it is some of the most ridiculous, most vicious fucking lyrics I've ever heard out of a hip-hop artist. It's just so... what he says is just potent. It's funny at times. It's clever. It's creative. It's everything a good rapper should be able to do. He does it. And he does it all on one album, which is Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous. There are 12 songs on here, and every song fucking murders. Just murders. I can't even... To me, this is my favorite hip-hop album of all time. But I'm not saying it's the best. I'm putting the question out there. I'm putting it into conversation with the greats. I'm saying, okay, does Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous deserve to be mentioned with Illmatic? Reasonable Doubt. Illmatic turned 20 this year. It's crazy. People are really starting to look at, okay, hip-hop has a pretty rich history now. We got over 30 years of this shit now. So what are some of the best albums? And for me, the first thing that comes to mind is Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous by Big L. It's a quintessential hip-hop album. If you don't know who Big L are, if you don't know who Big L is, get with the fucking program. And more importantly, if you are one of the people watching this who are fans of metal and everything, like all the other stuff I do, who still thinks that hip-hop is shit and all of it sucks because you've heard a couple Lil Wayne songs, get with the fucking program. Figure this shit out. Listen to some real fucking hip-hop, and you'll see that it's fucking art. It's art just like any other piece of music. Guys like Nas and Big L and, Tupac and Biggie, Mobb Deep, Outkast, poets. Straight poets. The multi-syllable rhymes, the storytelling, the vivid imagery is just so impressive. And there's one album in particular from the 90s that to me captures all that and deserves to be mentioned in the Desert Island conversation, and that's Big L, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous. So do yourself a favor. When you get 45 minutes, sit down, press play, listen to all 12 tracks in order, and then decide for yourself.